All right, chapter 20. We hit World War II and everything is going to change. So let's take a look at part one of these notes, the road to war. How do we get this war started? And how does the United States get involved? So let's take a look at some of the economic and political causes of World War II. Number one cause is the Treaty of Versailles, which was supposed to be the thing, according to Wilson, that would end all wars. All right. Well, the Treaty of Versailles turned out to be a mess. Germany, Italy, Japan, Soviet Union all felt betrayed, excluded by the Treaty of Versailles. It does not go very well. Okay, here's a great picture, a great cartoon. You got Wilson, and he's leading. They're singing a song called "Everlasting Peace" with Wilson leading. Okay, there's the U.S. We're singing along, but let's look at everybody else. Italy is upset. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a second because they don't get to add more territory. They want more territory, and they thought they should have got it out of the Treaty of Versailles. Okay. The Italians the French wanted to be closer to the United States, wanted to expand their empire. They don't get it. England's got the British fleet in their pocket, just waiting to use it to take over things. Japan is looking for control of the Pacific, and they're all singing along, but they got little guns in their pockets and they're ready to use them. Okay? So, let's take a look at the Treaty of Versailles. What was wrong with it? Well, first of all, Germany gets the full blame for the war, and then, which makes them angry, then they get crushed by reparations payments, $30 million that they cannot afford, can't pay back, no way. They also have to give up a lot of their land. They lose quite a bit of territory to the French, among others. Some of it becomes new countries, some of it's given to France. Several things happen there, and they lose some land, and they're really not happy with the terms of this treaty. Italy, if you remember World War I, Italy was on the side with Germany at the beginning of the war, then they joined the Allies at the end of the war, and they did that with the expectation of gaining territory. They thought they were going to get some territory in Africa. They thought they might get some territory, maybe Greece, maybe some other places. But when the treaty was drawn up, Italy didn't get what they thought they should have got. Japan, meanwhile, wanted to expand into China, and the treaty said, no, you can't go there. Can't do that. Russia didn't even have a voice at this treaty conference because they were in the midst of their civil war. They were converting. The Tsar had been overthrown, and the communists were in power and were consolidating their power. So when the terms that set up Europe were drawn up, the Soviet Union got left out. Russia got left out. Pause here. Now, the League of Nations was supposed to keep all this in control and stop all these big things from happening, all the bad stuff from happening. They turned out to be terribly useless for the most part. You have to remember, first of all, the United States, the people who came up with the idea, are not part of the League of Nations. We're not involved. And it proves to be, nobody missed us because it doesn't really control major conflicts. It can't do anything with disarmament as the Germans begin to arm themselves and the British continue to arm themselves. There's no military effective force when, I'm going to give you a whole list of things that happen that maybe the League of Nations could have stopped, but since they can't have a military force or don't have an effective military force, they can't stop anything. The League of Nations just is a group of people who talk about things and watch things happen, and they can't do anything about it. The League of Nations is relatively useless. So, between the Treaty of Versailles and the uselessness of the League of Nations, that is one of the big causes of World War II. Now, before we really get into discussion, we've got to meet these people. Okay? You can't discuss this war without knowing who's who. Okay? Let's take a look at who are the Allies, who's on what side here. We'll start with the Allies. The leader of the Allies is Winston Churchill. Churchill, during the 20s and into the 30s, keeps telling the British people, look out for Hitler, look out for Hitler, look out for Hitler. He is bad and evil and terrible. When war finally breaks out, the English turn to Churchill and say, help. And Churchill becomes prime minister and is going to turn out to be a brilliant leader and is going to lead the British through the war and make sure that the Allies win the war. Stalin is the communist leader of the Soviet Union. Stalin is a brutal dictator, a totalitarian regime. He sets up, he controls the lives of his people. He kills 10 to 20 million of his own people to ensure his rule and to make sure that he has total control of his country. He's going to prove invaluable towards the end of the war, or actually not towards the end of the war, towards the middle to the end of the war, in providing troops and providing leadership from the Soviets to pressure the Germans from the east. Okay? Franklin Delano Roosevelt is going to serve his third and fourth part of his fourth terms. Okay? He's going to be the president of the United States when the war begins. He's going to be the only four-term president. So he will be there when the war begins. He will die right before the end of the war. Harry Truman will take over from Roosevelt towards the end of the war. Truman is going to be the one who's going to decide to drop the atomic bomb on Japan. Charles de Gaulle, leader of the French. De Gaulle, when France is overrun by the Germans, de Gaulle is exiled to Great Britain, and he's going to stay there until the British and the Americans, until D-Day, when the Americans come back. De Gaulle will then come back and lead the French through the rest of the war. Chiang Kai-shek, leader of China, has multiple problems. Chiang Kai-shek is leader of China. He has been invaded by the Japanese, and at the same time, he's going to face a communist threat and a civil war. So he's fighting a civil war and the Japanese at the same time. Okay? So here are your Allied leaders, the major Allied leaders. Okay? Let's take a look at the Axis. Two Germans to know. First is Hitler. Hitler was a soldier in World War I. A bitter experience. He was very upset about how Germany was treated with the Treaty of Versailles. He's going to take over the Nazi Party and eventually take over Germany by promising to restore German power, to unite all the German-speaking people, to put Germany in a position of power in Europe. His right-hand man is Hermann Göring. Göring is going to be the leader of the Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force, and he's going to be Hitler's #1 advisor on military matters for much of the war. Okay. Benito Mussolini takes over Italy in the 20s, sets up a fascist regime, and models himself after Augustus. He says he's creating a new Roman Empire. He promises the people of Italy that he will make Italy a very, very powerful European country. Together with Hitler, the two of them start what's called the Axis. They're going to be the center. They say we're going to be the center of power in Europe between Mussolini and Hitler. Later on, they're going to be joined by the Japanese. Okay. The Japanese are led by a guy named Hirohito. Hirohito is going to be emperor. He is a divine ruler of Japan. But really, Hirohito takes a back seat to the military. Hirohito is the leader in name, pretty much name only. The guy who's really leading Japan during the war is Hideki Tojo, and Tojo is the military leader. So, now we got the players. Okay, now we know who's basically in it. Let's see how this thing gets started. Pause here. Axis countries are all totalitarian leaders. Total control of their country, all of them. Okay, they can do what they want to, when they want to, with their people, and force them to do anything. The Axis countries, Italy, and Germany, and Japan, all share one common goal. They want to expand their land holdings. They want to form empires. They want to become more stronger and more powerful than they are. Okay, and that's the one thing that's going to drive this war, is they want land. Okay? They want to form their own empires. Oh, wow. Okay, here we go. Okay? So you got the players, you got the governments, you know what they're aiming for. In their drive to add land and start their empires, in the 1930s, you're going to see a series of acts of aggression as these countries attack innocent other groups of people and take them over. 1930s, all through the 30s, Japan is going to invade Manchuria, which is a Chinese province, okay, and the rest of China, as it seeks to take over and dominate Asia. Okay, Japan's plan is to take over Asia. They want the resources in China. There's oil in China, and they want to control it. Okay, I'm going to keep talking about oil, oil, oil. Oil is driving all of this because with the new inventions, with ships and planes and tanks and everything. It all depends on oil. So oil is tremendously important. If you want to be a military power, you have to have a source of oil. So Japan is looking to China first, and they're going to try to dominate all of Asia. Italy, meanwhile, looking to expand its empire, going to attack Ethiopia. It's one of the few African countries left that's independent. Meanwhile, the rest of Africa has been taken over by France, by Germany, by the British. So Italy goes after Ethiopia and tries to add Ethiopia to the new Italian empire. Germany, meanwhile, Hitler is trying to put together all the German-speaking people and into one big country. So he goes into the Rhineland, which is a land that was taken away from Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. It's the region bordering France and Belgium. He sends troops in and just takes it over. And everyone looks at him and says, "You can't do that." And he says, "Ha, I did. I already did it." Meanwhile, in Spain, there's a civil war. Another fascist leader, kind of like Mussolini, a guy named Francisco Franco. Franco is going to start a war with the liberal democratic government of Spain. It starts a civil war, and Hitler and Mussolini are going to help Franco to take over Spain. It's basically practice war. This is the chance where the Nazis send out their army for the first time. Mussolini sends out parts of his army. This is a lot of training and new techniques and new weapons and new ways to fight. The British assist the Spanish. The French assist the Spanish. Franco fights against them with help from Hitler and Mussolini. This is a practice war. This is a preview of what's to come. Who's fighting with who and what kind of technology they're going to use. So from 1936 to 39, the Spanish Civil War is going on. Franco is eventually going to win. 1938, Hitler goes back into Austria, right, which was part of Germany at one point, and takes over Austria. Just went in and took it over. Okay? And again, everybody looks at him and says, "Hey, well, you can't do that." Well, Hitler doesn't just want to stop there. He wants to take over the Sudetenland, which is the western region of Czechoslovakia. So he goes in and the British and the French come together and the Russians and say, "You can't do that." They have a meeting. They agree that, okay, yeah, I guess you can do it. It's called the Munich Agreement. And it gave Germany Sudetenland. I can never say that word. So now, Hitler has gotten control of all of the territory he's lost, except for one area, which is Poland. So 1939, after everyone has agreed to give him the parts of Czechoslovakia there, they said, "You can't have any more," and he says, "Sure, I'm not going to take any more," and then he does. 1939, World War II begins when Germany invades Poland, and France and Great Britain say, "That's it, we said you can't go any farther, you can't expand anymore," and so war has begun. Now, interestingly enough, you will notice that Germany has made a deal with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union wants control of the Slavic people in Poland. Germany wants control of the Germanic-speaking people in Poland, in that general area. So they're going to divide up Poland. So they've made a deal. You'll notice that the Soviet Unions, I listed them as an ally. At the beginning, they're fighting with Germany. They're going to continue to try to be peaceful. Stalin misreads Hitler entirely. He thinks Hitler will leave him alone, when in fact Hitler hates communists more than he hates almost anything else, and that's saying a lot. And it's at the beginning of the war, they're going to work together, but eventually Germany is going to turn on the Soviet Union and attack them. And we'll get to that part of the war later. But here you see a continued pattern of aggression as Japan and Germany and Italy take over territory, and keep taking over territory and keep pushing until finally we've got a war when Germany invades Poland. Pause here.